We have our third meeting of the series, and we chose the subject of, well, I chose the subject of relationship. It's a very broad one, but it's also very central. And of course, it is at the heart of the basic theme for this series, which was how to live in this world. To live in this world, to live is to be related. That was Kay's fundamental statement. I always wonder, that was very big a statement, such a simplistic thing to say, and yet so beautifully encompassing, that to live is to be related, that nothing can exist in isolation. You like everything that exists is the result and is sustained by relationship. The cosmos is relationship. Life is relationship. That is tremendous, no? Just when you think of it. And therefore, the interconnectedness is already, if you like, a given of existence. That you can't separate existence from interconnectedness, from relationship. When I say me, it's that me is dissolved in a network of infinite connections, going back in time, spreading right now through the present around the globe and God knows where else. And I don't know, maybe going on also beyond this form and this voice and this meaning. So there's something tremendous about that. The totality of existence is the totality of relationship. And that's a dynamic creative process. Maybe unending, we don't know. Maybe it has a source, an origin. Even physicists are not clear on that he has an origin, though they speculate that he may have an end. But that end may be another beginning. So they cannot say even themselves. So that's very interesting because we're in the middle of it. We are in relationship. Without relationship, we are not. So we're going to look into it, of course, in a more direct way. I think in this book and in the texts that are there related to this topic, basically Krishnamurti refers not to such cosmic dimension per se, though he comes upon it, but focuses on what our relationship with each other is. Human relationship. How do we get along with each other or don't? And that's why I put all these other chapters together. So there's relationship, which is the encompassing subject. Then there is love and sex. And then there is, what is it? Let me look at the list. I forgot my own list. Dependence and attachment, happiness and passion. Those are clearly related, of course. Relationship and love are very clearly connected. I think we wouldn't think of relationship, human relationship, without the feeling of love, right? Though it's often missing. Then Krishnamurti, when he goes into the question of love, of course, he looks at negatively what it is not. So he looks at pleasure. And of course, sex plays a major part in human relationships, so we had to look at that. But he mostly looks at the question of pleasure and asks whether pleasure is love. Then attachment is a very important aspect of human relationship and dependence, and asks whether love is attachment. Then he looks at passion, which is part of the connected with sex for us, but has a deeper meaning, right, for him. So is passion love, or is lust passion, and so on? And then I end up with the question of happiness. I didn't know exactly where to put that chapter, but I suppose it fits with relationship, because essentially when we are related, we are happy. Where are we happy? When are we happy? When we have a good relationship, have a loving, caring relationship. So I think they fit, overall, and mostly goes relationship, love, what it is not, and then finding the freedom from those factors, which he hopes are, in fact, the freedom is where he's going at, because freedom is love. Freedom from the factors of what prevented. So let's go. When he addresses the question of relationship, of course, they start already with the fact that there's no relationship. I think that's a bit much. They should start with love. We're all loving each other. Let's feel for each other. He's not that kind of sentimental guy, isn't he? You get frustrated a lot of spiritualists because he starts from pain and disaster. And says we have to face what is. Don't go dreaming, sentimentality, love of God. Let's get together. Hold hands. We are loving each other. What are we talking about? There is no hatred in the world. He's rubbish. No, he doesn't say that, but he says, face it. Is there a relationship or is there not? Right? Now, most people would say, yes, there is, and there isn't. We might go halfway just not to throw it all out. But the fact is that divisions, distances, separations, frictions, and worse, persist. That our approach to relationships seems to be riddled with pitfalls, and those can cause severe damage, as a matter of fact. We only have to look at the family, which at one point Krishnamurti called an opportunity to love, because his relationship, right, of the most intimate kind, where there is natural dependence, where there's maybe natural attachment, right? Because again, you can't throw these words out just like that. Good old psychologists like Gabor Mate would come along and say, attachment is the natural thing. The child is naturally attached to the parents because they are absolutely dependent on the care they receive from them. And actually, if you don't have proper attachment, as he understands the word, by the way, then that is one cause of trauma because it means neglect. So careful. We're not also going to prejudge these words because they may have also a natural meaning. And that's one of the things we might find through this discussion or this inquiry, in which Krishnamurti is tracing a very delicate line between what is a natural aspect of our existence, such as dependence. He doesn't go into that very much, but I'm bringing it in so that we don't just get a prejudice from Krishnamurti regarding what attachment might mean. There may be a natural meaning to attachment, and there may be a destructive meaning to attachment. There may be a proper meaning to pleasure, and there may be a destructive meaning to pleasure. There may be a proper meaning to passion, and an improper meaning to passion, and so on, you see? That he's cutting a delicate line in the meanings of those things, the constructive, natural, healthy, and sane, and the destructive. So that will be part of our daily life anyway, how we navigate the difficulties of relating all together and of being together in this world, living in this world, how we live, destructively or creatively, essentially, lovingly or not. So that's what we're saying. So Krishnamurti, they start with this thing. What is this problem with us? That we seem to find it very difficult, or we always come upon that little distance between one person and another, even in the most intimate of environments, in marriage and so on. I used to say, we meet in bed, but, everybody, husband and wife, mother and father and children are all, going their own separate ways otherwise. They have separate interests. The separateness persists, right? Why is that? They say, well, because everybody is wrapped up in their own self-interest. That's one first diagnosis to put across. So we're all in our own envelope. I like that word. We're in an envelope. We're enveloped. I think that's what it means, right? By this bubble of self-concern. The self is a bubble of self-concern. It's me at the center, and then there is a periphery. There is a bubble. There is an envelope. Everybody has an envelope. Probably psychics can see the envelope. I don't manage to see the envelope, but maybe I think probably some people are hypersensitive. They might see the envelope, how far it goes. 1 meter, 2 meters, or 3 meters, whatever. See, there's an envelope. There's a radius, the radius of self-interest, right? There's that. So that envelope marks a space. It was very interesting in this chapter. I hope you noticed that that Krishnamurti considers that the problem of relationship, the issue of separation, is an issue of space. That there is a space between you and me. The space is created by the me, which is also creates a space between it and its own periphery. So there's this sense of separateness between me and what I am, actually, my thoughts, my feelings. It creates separation, distance at every point. He says, that's not me, even when it is. That's part of the problem. It projects things on others and doesn't see them as part of itself, and therefore reacts as though it was seeing the others, which it isn't seeing at all. There is a problem of perception in the creation of this separation between the me and the not me, both psychologically, internally, as well as in relation to another. The me and the not me is just the recipe for disaster. So is there an end to that time? I would throw in something else, which seems to me that Krishnamurti didn't quite bring out in this case, though he hinted at it, and maybe it's important to recollect, to revise, to review, to revisit, which is that actually this distance is a distance of time. The me is time. Each of us is his own history. There's a particular conditioning as well as a universal conditioning. Deep down, we all carry the same conditioning. We carry the same burden of time because we are human beings, and as such, we are the inheritors of the same human condition. Human nature, if some people want to call it, though that's a very questionable thing, what is human nature? But there is this sense of time that has already structured consciousness in a certain universal way, which then shapes each of us in particular ways. We are the manifestation of this time-bound consciousness, which is what separates us once it forms the nucleus of interest, which is me. The me is consciousness, which is universal, creating particular centers, which then have their own interests and must defend those interests against others. That focus of self-interest is therefore one of the distancing factors of division and conflict that arises in life. He said something very interesting, which was, how would you collapse this space, right? How would this space ever collapse? So first, by seeing that it is our own creation and that it is a fiction of space, because it's just created by thought, right? And he says that if we see that our relationships are not between us as living human beings, but between two thoughts. How does thought relate, right? Noisy thoughts is the noise of thought. The noise in my head, the noise in your head. There are two different noises, and sometimes maybe they make some music, but oftentimes not. It's the cacophony of thought. They don't meet. Now, if thought is not there, do we meet? He suggests, yes. I'm not sure. We have to experiment with that. We have to see, first of all, that it is thought that is relating to thought. He often called it images, right? I have my image of myself, and I have my image of you. You have my image of you, your image of yourself, and your image of me. That's why a friend of mine says, if you go that way, boy, we'll never get there. Because there are 4 people already trying to relate. Whom are you? I have to relate to the image you have of me with the image that I have of myself, and you have to relate to the image that I have of you, and then to me, I don't know, I forget my mathematics, but there should be a number of permutations there possible to add to the chaos. I'm not going there. Let's stick with the simplest way. As Krishnamurti said, when you face a complicated problem, make it simple, if you can. So the simplicity is simply the image of oneself, the center and its radius, and how then will it relate to another center with its radius? This is the problem. There's a picture of Krishnamurti with a student in Rishi Valley, and he's holding her hand, and there's a pole right in between them. He says, here, the eternal problem. There is a pole, there's always something between us. He points to the pole and says, here, The eternal problem. No, that was a very good joke. So Krishnamurti was very aware of that, right? And another joke he liked to tell, you see, there's two egotists get married, what do you get? And the answer was two egotists, because there's no marriage. They can never fuse together. See, it took me a while to understand that joke, but what's the joke? Well, the joke is that, you see, there's no possible marriage between these two. They remain two separate entities. There's no marriage. So space is fundamental in this, to become aware of the fact that one is creating the space. The space doesn't really exist. The space is created by me, which is the factor of time, which is tied to its own past, and then projects from there whatever the reality it expects, projects its own self-interest, its likes, dislikes, the observer. That's why Krishnamurti always comes to that point. As long as the observer is there, there's no relationship. That's terrible because I'm always there. So the only way I possibly can proceed from life is through self-pity, feeling sorry for myself, because I will never have love and relationship as long as I exist psychologically. I'm just kidding. We're going to move to love. Now, love is, of course, the essence, right? If there is love, there is relationship, there is a quality of harmony, there's no me and you. That's the supposed significance. I don't know, the songs, the mystics and so on, you see love is there when there is no separation of any kind. So in a way, that's the opposite, right? Of this separation and the division and the conflict. Somebody also in this discourse puts them that way, right? Wherever there is division and conflict, there is no love. So love is kind of the ending of that, the antidote of that. He says is not the opposite of that. There's no opposites within this scope as ways of resolving anything, because the opposite is just a reaction, and as such a reaction, it contains its own opposite. That's what he says, right? The man who's afraid and becomes brave is still afraid, except that he's changed the direction of his fear, and so on. So that's a question to ask ourselves as well, how the opposites are the same and why he doesn't go that way. The quintessential opposite is what is versus what should be. And that's the way we generally put to ourselves the plan we have been conditioned to accept as the movement towards self-improvement and change. And he says that will never work. If you're violent, the projection of the ideal of non-violence will not work. It only works by staying with what is. The same here, the same in terms of this division and conflict. We can't invent a solution of we're going to love one another. As long as the center is there, that love will not work. It will be a formula. It will be an ideal. It will be some kind of imposed programmatic way of action, right? And you can see what's happening with all the religions who have tried it. They ended up in massive corruption. So that's not the way of love. Love is much subtler. But Krishnamurti says love is also something you cannot postulate. It is not something that you can define and practice. Interesting. You see, some people say you can practice loving kindness. And there may be something to it, you see, in the sense of that we don't think of others, for example. So why not think of others kindly? So I'm sending my ex loving kindness. After all the mess of the divorce, I'll say, yes, darling, you be good, you be well. Why not? Why are we always self-centered and in wishing ill of others? What is that? So that's it's an interesting challenge, no? But will that fundamentally change us? Maybe in some significant way, right? Maybe in some relative way, rather. It may be that we don't think of others, for example, in a kind way. So to be invited to do that, that might just do something, right? The world is full of ill will. We ourselves are full of ill will at a certain level. We have resentments. We wish ill of others. So why should we? See, that's another question. That, of course, is the denial of love. We don't have that quality of love in us. That's just a sign, right? That we don't have it. But love, he says, can be approached this positive way. Through practice, through ideals, through anything. You can't say, love is this, you do that. Oh, I mean, they can say to me, be kind. Right? My parents said, be kind. Don't be respectful. That's part of it. So there's instructions that one can give. But the real flame of love, which Krishnamurti is talking about, that's a bit different. I think there's something very pure that is not practiced, cannot even be defined. And that's the reason why, in his reasoning anyway, as I understand it, he says he must be approached negatively by looking at what it is not. Namely, Krishnamurti spends a lot of time, poor man, going on about dissolving what he feels are our misunderstandings concerning the real nature of these things. And love is so central to our lives that he has to spend a lot of time on it, because we have put a lot of meaning on, we have said love is this and love is that. That's the positive way. He says, no, love is not this. That's the negative way. Now, what is love? Love is pleasure. Love is sex. Consult any pop song. I love you, baby, and so on. So that's the whole story. Our culture has gone that way, has identified love and pleasure. You can see that the relationship man and woman and so on, sex plays a major part. That kind of union becomes an important part. But pleasure is more extensive just than sex, right? And he says sex becomes very important because it offers us a space, a relationship in which there is freedom and intensity, where the self can be forgotten. We find self-forgetfulness in that act. The rest of our relationships and the world is a continuous friction of self. And sex seems to sort of erase that. That's the beauty of it. He even says this much. I never heard him say that there was beauty in sex, but there it is. The sense of union without that barrier of the self, right? There's this a kind of self-abandonment. What happens is, of course, that we become attached, addicted to the pleasure, and therefore it becomes his own misery. That's the thing, the continuation of the experience, the chewing of the cud of desire. The past comes back and we project it again into the future, and we want more, endlessly, giving rise, of course, because we cultivate it in thought, and we feed this artificial hunger through desire, right? And the world is feeding it continuously. You can see it, movies and ads and everything else. Our Western society has really turned in that direction massively. Not that it was not always there. It was always there, but it has become almost an industrial device, right? To keep our desires, our appetites primed for whatever next object of commercialism might be associated with it. We're manipulating ourselves through this fundamental basic instinct to consume other things, because it's just part of appetite, part of desire. And what moves this world of commercialism but desire? And what moves us but desire? And what is desire? Krishnamurti really goes on. You see, he won't stop at the surface. He finds one truth, and then he says, behind that there is another. So what's the truth of desire? What's the nature of desire? So he says, just thinking, which picks up on sensation, remembers it, of course, this memory of sensation, of pleasure, of real pleasure, of actual delight. Okay? This pleasure. Pleasure is, again, natural. You eat an apple that is very good, and boy, an orange, whatever. Sex, whatever it is, there is pleasure. It's part of our bodily intelligence, of our filtering the world through sensation. And even at a very elementary level, what is good and what's not good. See, when you are hungry, you feel a sort of pain. And then when you eat, you have a pleasure, the pleasure of the satisfaction of that need, that basic appetite. But there is a way in which appetite is sustained by thought, because we want more. It's a kind of greed, it's a kind of craving. So the craving is where Krishnamurti doesn't take issue with sensation, doesn't even take issue with any of these fields of sensation. Well, I don't know any, but they're natural fields of sensation. The sensation is altogether natural, and at that level, there is not a problem. The problem arises when desire starts, and desire is thought, picking up on the image of the sensation, the memory, and giving it continuity, and therefore feeding an artificial appetite, which leads to frustration, expectation, frustration, and, if it is strong enough, to violence. So there is violence in relation to desire because of this extreme importance that we put on it, partly because we are all seeking some kind of happiness. He used to say this thing, which was, the brain cannot live without some kind of happiness. Wait a minute. In that case, there's also something natural that the brain would want happiness. It's just a matter of where it lies. See, and that may be why thought picks up on it and tries to feed that happiness artificially to the brain. And the brain just gets hooked on it because it needs it. So there is maybe a factor of addiction that arises when thought picks up on this need of the brain for some kind of happiness and feeds it in this artificial imaginary way. Right? But doing that, that is the past. The brain is then hooked on its own past and then tries to reduce reality also to conform to that past and the expectations of that past. But above all, because it is the past, because it is self-interest, it creates the center. That's why Craig connects craving, desire, and the formation of a center, of psychological center or self, because it is the center of craving, is the one that desires. Desire is its own self, is its own movement towards its own objects, and the consequent satisfaction or frustration, which is how we measure our experiences in life and the value of our relationships. Relationships become measured by that standard of satisfaction or not satisfaction. When relationship becomes a measure of satisfaction or dissatisfaction, that we're not connected. There is something already that is me and its pursuits at the core. We are pursuing our own pleasure, we are pursuing our own desires, and the other is an object for us in terms of achieving those things or not. Imagine the potential for misunderstanding and distance in that, because the two must match at some level, be the desire for pleasure, for security, for status, or whatever it is. Relationships become a matter of convenience, right? Usage and convenience. That is not relationship, I'm afraid. So that's a major issue, a major warning, what can go wrong with the relationship based on desire and the pursuit of pleasure. This leads to attachment. Because as you see, we depend on these things for our pleasures, for our security, whatever aims we have. The motive of relationship is very important. What is our motive? See, every detective story begins with, where there is a crime, begins with the search for the motive. So relationship, we should look for the motive before the crime takes place. If the motive is to achieve pleasure and so on, and we know that something is going to happen down the line, which is going to trip us up and trip up the other, because we're going to become dependent on the other supplying us with that kind of product. I'm sorry, this is awful language. I mean, I don't like it myself. It's just industrial, an industrial model of relationship. I used to call it the trade model, though, but it's a bit softer. You give me this, I give you that. It's a trade model of relationship. But anyway, we become dependent and attached. Now, attached is that you possess, you hook on to something, right? You become dependent on that thing. But of course, the other person is not just an object, right? Therefore, they are free inherently. So you have to limit their freedom. That becomes resistance. That becomes a battle with the other person as well as with the others, because everybody's competing for the same resources. This is a competitive world, sexually, financially, politically, you name it. It's a what a species. So there you have it, the competitive element. Therefore, what he calls resistance comes in. The self, of course, has to protect its own domains, be it sexual, be it social, be it political, financial, whatever domains he has created for itself in his own security, within his bubble, within his space of self-interest, he will protect those. So there is violence inherently in it, right? And therefore, that's not love. Krishnamurti is clear. Whatever assumptions you made about love, if they end up producing the contrary results as to the meaning of love, which is division and conflict, you may be sure that's not love. So pleasure is not love, as produced by thought. He calls it lust in these readings, which he usually doesn't because it's a bit condemnatory and sounds very Christian. But he calls it that. The thought, pleasure produced by thought as desire is lust, not love, right? Sex has its own place in life when it comes from love, and so on. And now attachment also. We said they had maybe a proper meaning when you look at the kid of the child and the mother and so on, as good old Gabor Mate has told us. And I think that's a relevant thing to remember because it's a very relevant aspect of our own proper, healthy upbringing, right? We must care for our children and give them the proper care. That's what it means, right? Then they are free eventually because they gather their own strength. But they won't gather their own strength unless we give them the care, proper care and affection that they need. If we neglect them, the likelihood is they will grow up traumatized and therefore already crippled for life. So that's the proper meaning of attachment. But here it is possessiveness, it is domination, it is conflict, it is violence, and therefore the ending of love. That's how love goes out of the window. He says the moment the me comes in and says, this is mine, love flies away. It's a bird, remember? Love is a winged god. So it flies away out of the window. So attachment is not love. Dependence is not love. Pleasure is not love. He says thought is not love. Now, I had never put the two together for a long time. It took me a while to figure out why does it. But because the whole movement of thought is behind attachment, is behind pleasure, what we are attached to is actually not even the other person as a person, but the image of the object that we require for the satisfaction of desire, which is the product of thought. So thought is behind the whole thing. And Kay has no hesitation in saying that thought per se is divisive. It discriminates, it separates, it is the factor of space because it is again based on the past and bring the past to bear on everything. And the me, what the moment craving comes in, creates that focus of craving and relationship, and it separates itself because its domination is a domain and therefore a separation from others and from itself, even from within. This is a deep insight if we could get to it. I'm being very quick about it because I just want to say one more thing. But that it's a very important central issue. Why is thought not love? Thought may be like sex, that it can function properly if it comes from love. But if it pretends to be love, then it's not in its right place. And that is what it's pretending when it's cultivating desire. He says, I am love. Thought says this because it's cultivating these images and producing all these feelings of desire, of pleasure, of possession, satisfaction. The satisfaction it apparently gets is tremendous from these things, right? The me needs the mind in order to sense that it is. Without the mind, there is no me. And that's why possession is inherent to that movement. But the movement of possession is inherently divisive because it condemns the other to be an object. It reduces the freedom of the other. And freedom is what it is about. Freedom from these factors of division and conflict. Ultimately, that's my last point, I think, or maybe not. See, is that he says, why are we attached? He even goes a little further. I was saying we're attached because we want to secure the products of Jesus Christ. Well, there it is again. Of our own desires. We want to get what we are aiming at because that's our satisfaction and our happiness. Right? That's the movement of passion as we understand it. That which is created by thought. But Kay goes further and says, what is actually, why are we attached? Why is that such a central place, such a central role in our psychology? He says, because we feel we are nothing. He always brings it to this thing, huh? He invariably comes down to the sense of, we sense that we are nothing, that we are empty. In this instance, he used the image of the desert. We feel the barrenness of our own inner world, that inward poverty. We're poor, inadequate, uncertain, no real solid ground to our own being. We're afraid of that desert. We're afraid of our own nothingness. People say around here we are nothing, but they don't really mean it because they keep seeking something beyond it, you see. So the nothingness seems difficult to face as such. The ground, the actuality of the emptiness, the arid land, the wasteland of consciousness, the wasteland of human experience. He keeps driving this mildly, kindly, softly, because I suppose it's just such an extreme denial of the field in which most of humanity has been cultivating, and which for him remains an arid land. The field of the known, the field of thought, the field of desire, the field of attachment, fear, and their violence. He says, there's no peace here. There's no love here. And without love, what flowers are going to bloom in this desert? They can't. There's no rain. It's a good old metaphor. There's no rain. Only love will bring rain. Love is the rain that will make the desert bloom. It's an extraordinary metaphor. I think it fits, though. It fits. So he says, it's this emptiness we're escaping from. And because we don't have love, or we're full of our own self-pity, we hope through the love of another to forget ourselves. We hope that by attaching ourselves to a beautiful other, we will gain a share in their beauty. Right? We possess beauty. So the moment you possess beauty, you've destroyed it and made it ugly, right? But we do that because we want to share in these qualities. We want to attach them to ourselves in order to escape from that sense of emptiness and nothingness. The self has to possess, has to own in order to feel. Look what is happening. The great greedy monsters that lead the world cannot think of cooperating without possession. They need possession in order to feel that they are. It's so blatant and so brutal that whole armies are mobilized in order to ensure those possessions. And they call it security, and they call it greatness, and they call it, ultimately, me. It's a beautiful diagnosis. If you see it, this is the world. That's what Kay says. If you look at it, this is the world we've made. From this center, from this escape from emptiness, from this lack of love, because we move through thought. So the ending of these factors is the emergence of love. Passion emerges when the self is not. It's a different kind of passion. The ending of self is freedom. And the essence of freedom is love. And the essence of love is passion. And passion is strangely, because we see he put it there and he says, passion is the essence of life. He put a lot of beautiful things together that I had never heard him put together before. That passion is the essence of life. And I put them like this, right? With the ending of self is the birth of freedom. Freedom is love, the essence of love, and the essence of love is passion, and passion is the essence of life. So there you have a beautiful unity that emerges out of a denial, of the negation of the factors, the misunderstandings, the misappropriation of the meaning of love and relationship by thought and time. With the ending of self and its time, there is freedom, which is the essence of love, which is the essence of passion, which is the essence of life. I think there's something tremendous about that. All righty. Let's discuss.
Would you repeat that last the last bit one more time for me, please?
I think today I can repeat it because I repeated it already. It's the only time I can do that.
Oh,
Oftentimes.
okay.
No, but no, I'm just
I'll
kidding.
wait for the recording. It's fine.
No, no. I'm just kidding.
I just
Um,
like the way that it
yeah,
unpacked.
yeah, but I also like it myself. I mean, I don't mind repeating it because I think it bears repeating. It's that this is what he says basically. I put a few things together there that he didn't, but I think that they do fit. They do fit. They follow each other. I don't know in that order he would put it in that exact order, but he wasn't very good at putting things in order anyway. So let's just say that there's a connection. That's all. So the ending of self, right, of the self-centered movement is the essence of freedom. Freedom is the essence of love. Love is the essence of passion, or passion is the essence of love, and passion is the essence of life. So there's a movement from the ending of self to freedom to love to passion to life. I think there's even something else there, which is creation somewhere in the middle, right? Because he says this, we cannot be creative without passion. See, passion is also the essence of creation. You could even insert another one, which is passion is the essence of creation and creation is the essence of life. You could even put even that one factor there because creation is very important, as a matter of fact, in all this. It's an appeal, the whole of Krishnamurti's teachings is an appeal to the awakening to a fundamental creativeness in existence. The life, the art of living is the word art in itself, not just mean create a rigid order, like it used to mean, right? Art means putting everything in its right place. Yeah, but this means a dynamic, creative quality of being. And he keeps pointing to this, that without the creative source being active in our daily lives, life cannot sustain itself in order. Because the order is inherently creative, is not mechanical. The mechanical is an aspect that we need to function, but is dependent for its right operation on the presence of the creative factor, which is intelligence, and which is love. He puts the two together, really. Love and intelligence going together. So that's the harmony he sees potentially in discovering, but in finding and denying. That's why the negative, the via negativa of Krishnamurti, discovering the real sources of delusion that lie at the heart of consciousness. And that's the first and foremost difficulty. So he doesn't want to bypass that because you cannot bypass it. It has to be faced. That's the general condition of humanity. There are few who are free from this. And therefore, it is the first task of creativity, the approach to creativity, to understand, to see. The way he says seeing is intelligence, seeing is more important than intelligence. The seeing is the freeing, right? So freedom and seeing are together, intelligence and freedom go together, right? So there is that quality that he wants to bring about, but it's creativity itself. Life is inherently creative. And that's what he means to bring about, because the fundamental conflict is between the mechanical and the creative. Therefore, between time as self and life itself. That's why if life is relationship, thought is and self are unable to meet it, because life is beyond thought and time. That's one of the things I keep coming again up upon, that he's denying this, and therefore he's challenging this whole domain of consciousness as being inherently antithetical to the creative movement of of life, not of consciousness. Creative movement of life, not of consciousness. Consciousness is something else. It can, nonetheless, consciousness or mind respond. This is what he puts further, right? Because otherwise, what will we do in this world? We'll be like divided, right? We're still having consciousness versus intelligence, love versus desire. We won't know what to put things. The disorder will continue. So there has to be a communication between. You see, all of these things have to touch existence. And you cannot leave them in the realm of the ideal, love and intelligence and wholeness and all that kind of good stuff. No, they have to come into the world. Otherwise, they might as well be left to the gods. I don't know. Maybe this is a very Christian thing. Incarnate. They have to incarnate for the love of Jesus. The incarnation is necessary, but Kay says yes. It incarnates. It incarnates now. The now is where it all happens. If we are open to that now, if we open up the now, that even better, not open to the now, but open the now, that the now is another dimension in which the mechanical subsides as the dominant focus of our existence, the self, the bubble bursts. And therefore, that quality of intelligence, freedom, love, and so on can come through because it's there as the very essence of life itself, which is creative by nature. I I think that is possible. I keep sensing this edge between time and this timeless dimension, which can therefore bring about a total quality of harmony between what belongs to time and what does not belong to time. Time is still there. I don't know why I left my clock this evening there, probably for the same reason. It doesn't work because I took out the battery. It makes too much noise, so time has stopped for me. But
Javier,
yes,
does relationship belong to time?
well, what do you think?
Well, as usual, you've put about a week's worth of contemplation on my plate. I
But you have
love,
2 weeks.
I
So
just love it. It's so great. But I'll begin with my head at least wants to tell me that it's in relationship, one thing to another, that so that equals creation in my head. Okay, so I'm now in relationship with you, with this group. There is something where that this merger of individual minds is creating something that otherwise wouldn't have been created, as an example. And we observe that everywhere in nature. One thing in relationship to another equals creation. So I guess I would ask, is relationship in time, is creation even in time?
I do
Or,
not.
or does it just appear that way to beings like us?
Right, beings like us. See, the creative is a mysterious thing, right? And it's talked about in different domains. So the creative artists and so on. I always remember this thing. It was one of the. It was I don't know if you know about the work of because I always liked art very much. I was myself had a little artistic talent as a kid, and I took to the history of art. I studied history of art and I taught history of art later on. And there was the surrealists were some of my favorite artists because they were sort of a little crazy and a little spontaneous. And one of the precursors of surrealism was an Italian called Giorgio de Chirico. And Giorgio de Chirico, he was painting very normal and even sort of humdrum pictures. And one day he got a stomach flu and he was really feeling very bad. And he sat outside. He went outside for a little rest and then sat in one of these, seats in the square, in the public square. I think it was Turin or Milan, I forget. And he just looked around in the piazza, in the square, and he saw the world like he had never seen it before. Went back to his studio and he broke through to a new form of pictorial expression. He called it pittura metafisica, metaphysical painting, because what he was depicting was not quite what he was seeing, but his own internal impression of what had happened there which he attributed to the distortion of his perception by the stomach flu. You understand? The sense of, I mean, because you're a surrealist, it makes me laugh because there's a little irony in what they do. But the sense of it takes a shift in perception to see the newness in what is ordinary for you already. He knew that square. He knew the statue atop the plinth. He knew the brick tower down the road. He knew the train station. He knew the arches that were there in that part of the street. But he had never seen that street. He had never seen that statue. He had never seen that train station. He had never seen that sky, those flags, and those clocks. This is creativity. And he was able to depict it and communicate it, and he was something else arising. I mean, every expression then becomes his own limitation, right? But the moment of perception was a breakthrough. This is what it takes. Therefore, when the past, and that past was erased or momentarily suspended because something was happening in his own body, which didn't allow that past to be the dominant act of perception. See, Krishnamurti says, when the I is completely free from the past, creative perception takes place. Poor old Giorgio de Chirico, with his stomach flu, had a breakthrough. I loved it. His early paintings are wonderful. It's something to delight in because they transport you to a different world also. He was able to convey, he was good enough as a painter, though he's not very sophisticated what he did, but he had enough skill to be able to communicate on a canvas that quality of otherness that he was perceiving in the most ordinary situations like his Italian piazza. It was not Italian piazza, it was the mind itself being reflected in everything it did. He saw the mind in the world. And that was already something else, you see? This consciousness. Okay, this is just an example, okay, Miles? I'm not answering your question. I'm just bringing in sort of what instances have happened. And other people, of course, have had creation in other ways, scientists, creativity in other ways, scientists, and so on. I think Krishnamurti himself, though he didn't like the word genius, because he felt that still specialized. There's a genius in music, and a genius in science, or a genius in this, in painting, or a genius here and a genius there, but not a genius everywhere, which is what he meant. Is there a total perception? Meaning, is there an understanding of the totality of consciousness of this whole, this will always drive at this, the real creativity, the emergence of the opening the floodgates of creation has to do with understanding the non-creative factors of consciousness. Some of it is necessary, and therefore you have to leave it there like a toolbox. The tools are not creative, but the one that uses the tool is the creative factor, right? Intelligence has to use the tool of thought. Intelligence is the creative factor because it's that which is not dependent on yesterday for his perceptions or his understanding. It's more immediate. When Kay talks about truth, and truth goes with creativity in his case, it's not something fixed. He talks about being up at the same rhythm, at the same time, with the same intensity as what is. That is quite an art. I don't know if that is even possible if you ask, no? What does that mean? What is? Everything is, right? Your most immediate world, your inner world, being creative about oneself. Think about that. About the inner world. The inner world is also mechanical. We recognize it too quickly. We recognize ourselves, our habits, our memories. They all are self-recognizing, self-referential. And that creates the bubble, which does not permit us, which creates its own isolation, the factor of isolation, and therefore the denial of relationship. So creativity and relationship go together. See, in that regard, all right? In that regard, relationship requires creativity, is the field of creativity, because it has to be free from the past, the mechanical operation of yesterday. That would be one way I see the connection between creativity and relationship. Relationship is creative, requires creativity.
Thank you, Javier. That serves a reminder to me about the pull, the attraction of time, of partitioning things and trying to explain things. Even in my question, it almost seems silly to me now after your explanation, is relationship and creativity and time. That seems like a kind of mind trick delusion that I somehow need an answer to or want an answer to. And based on what you said, it doesn't seem like any of it at its root is in time. It's only sense making somehow that I want to even ask the question, that I want some kind of answer to this, but it's obvious in your example of the artist. And thanks for sharing that you had this background in art history. That's really interesting to know. Songs and symphonies coming to these people in a flash, and these scientific breakthroughs coming through in a flash, seemingly no time, yet immense creativity, something that has never been thought of before. All of a sudden is just manifest. It's now there. Well, maybe it's not related to time at all.
The expression may be in time, but the actual creative source is not. Mozart, they keep playing Mozart, but it's not the same.
Well,
So is there any value then, where does the value come in one human being sort of relating to another, just to bring it down to street level?
Yeah, what is the what is the value?
Yeah.
That's an interesting question. Why should I be related to you? What's in it for me?
I mean, this sequence that you went through at the end that James asked you to recount, I'm going to go back and listen to that again, but it didn't start with passion, or it didn't start somewhere in the middle there. It started with this idea of no self, removal of that. And then these other things kind of fall down the line.
Yeah.
And coincidentally, a friend handed me a little booklet yesterday. I don't know if you recognize that.
Oh yeah.
It says,
Happy is the one who's nothing.
Happy is the one who is nothing. So I haven't opened it up yet, but I'm looking forward to that.
Happy is the one who is nothing.
Well, I have to say something here. It's become eminently clear to me that essentially the past is basically the albatross of time. That time keeps dragging the past along with it. And and creativity is when that all just falls away. And something new can arise.
See, relationship, what do we do? I fall in love. She falls in love with me.
Yeah. That's the tricky part. A relationship, that's hard.
Well, I mean, at least we say so. and I tell her my past, where I come from. I don't tell maybe everything, but just, the good parts at least, and some of the issues, of course, that I deal with, because I'm not perfection and I don't pretend to be. So you confide. Love is confidence. Love is confidential. Love is trust. You entrust another with your past. Maybe because that past is no longer the essence of what is happening. and yet it has to be shared because maybe he has his own glitches. I don't know. You share the past. You just tell, I come from this village among the hills, and I used to climb, and I used to see the sea, and then I dreamt of a horizon, and in that horizon there was you.
Well,
You
I
become
think
a poet. Love,
well,
love is the essence of poetry.
well, there's a healing that goes on when we can share our past vulnerability like that.
Yeah, you see, there's something beautiful in that if we can do that even.
Yeah.
That the past, and therefore see it as the past, though. Because love, if it is there even at that level, seems to introduce a newness into our horizon. That we say now we are not necessarily that. That is a memory. And what is happening now has another dimension. Because this other person changes me. Just like maybe their being with me changes them. There's a movement of mutual transformation if we're both alive to whatever is revealing. Kay's whole thing of relationship is a mirror where we are exposed. Relationship exposes us. Is self-exposure. I like that very much because it seemed to me to give to potentially already because of of that potential function of self-knowledge. He was not emphasizing per se the almost inherent traditional narcissism of relationship, in which I seek to confirm myself in the eyes of another. That's what we love, that they see us for the good person, beautiful person, intelligent persons, always good. I don't know why. The rat that we they don't see that. See, you see what I'm saying? Sort of the idealization, the better, my better half. We are each other's better halves.
To take this a step further, it seems to me that healing is creativity.
Yeah, but go on, say more, say more.
Well, in healing, you're able to allow these attachments to fall away and leave space for the new.
Yeah, that's love is the great panacea. You see, that's what everybody says, right? We've been saying this. Love is the only thing that can transform the world. Love is the great panacea. Love is the great healing. Why? Because it dissolves every single division. What is sickness but division, fragmentation, breaking down of that which belongs together and is whole by itself? Humanity is whole. We are one whole with nature. Inwardly, we are also a whole, but we aren't. The fragmentation breaks it all down, and therefore love goes out the window. If love is there, who ever had a problem in the world? So healing, love go together. Healing is health, healing is wholeness, and love is the perfume of wholeness.
So how do we know that we're healed? I want to introduce this concept of delusion at this point. I get that, you know, I'm looking into someone's eyes, they're sharing a poem, they're sharing something about their life, and it feels in a way like we're bringing each other into existence, you know, that how would I even know if I exist now? Okay, if I'm not somehow feeling other or apart. So there's this separation that seems to almost be a prerequisite to existence. You know what I mean? So we have this, and you know, Dan brings up, you know, the healing aspect of it, and then I can look at my head and wonder, you know, how much of it is the story that I'm telling myself to feel a certain way. you know, so that's a very powerful thing, you know. When I'm in a recovery community, for example, and we're sharing this common affliction, and we're really laying ourselves bare, belly up, you know, a lot of times, and being very willing and honest to communicate in a certain way. There's a feeling of unity, and is it the feeling that I'm chasing, or what is it exactly, you know, and how much of it is just a story, and does that even matter? You know, does it even matter if in the end I walk out of that room and I'm feeling lighter somehow?
What does healing take? What does it take to heal?
And when do I know when I've arrived at
Oh,
a
you'll
place
know,
where
you'll know, you'll know.
I'm healed?
That is guaranteed. When you don't have the disease, you know it. It may take even a while before you know it, because
Mm.
you see, health is something we don't notice. What we notice is the disease. The system is geared to alert us to that which is not in the right place. When it's just going fine, it doesn't say, "Oh wow, how healthy I am." No, it's just healthy, and it goes. That's the
That's
way
it.
of happiness, you see. So no, I don't think, but you'll know. But it's also almost a negative constatation. It's a negative verification of the fact that you're no longer sick. That's how you'll know that you're healed. Is that you know that you're no longer sick because you no longer have the same struggle with yourself regarding that thing that has been haunting you for years. It's gone. You may not even know. It may happen suddenly, and you actually are aware of that moment of revelation of insight, which clears that particular complex habit or whatever it is, conditioning. See, time is conditioning. Time is the complexes that it leaves behind. And we have to get to those in order to heal, because they continue to fragment our existence. Time is the factor of fragmentation. As you can see, what breaks relationship down is my past versus your past. It's the two thoughts. See, those are the two thoughts which can't meet. And they're complexes, and they're a bit, can be subtle, see? Can be childhood elements of abandonment, for example, what we just said. Suppose I was abandoned as a kid or neglected, and I carry that trauma with me. I'm not even aware necessarily. It will come out in conflict, friction in relationship. So the attention to that moment of emergence of those frictions and conflicts is fundamental in order to perceive the presence of the past, which is dividing me from reality, from actuality, from life. Time stagnates our being in a past. And that's what creates these frictions in our relationships. My relationships, one was the most intimate relationships I had that broke down, in my opinion, broke down because of that past was just immovable. It wouldn't, whenever it revealed itself, it wasn't able to even see itself. And therefore, there was no way to find freedom. Freedom is in the seeing, but you have to first see. Sometimes there's such resistance to even seeing that becomes almost impossible. So the healing is in the seeing and is in the attention to the manifestation of that past and to perceive it as such. When the past is perceived as the past, it really vanishes, but it has to be perceived. And that's just the everlasting conundrum, see, of this.
And that seems to be, I think, a very important thing, right? Which you just mentioned, Javier, the perception. We are normally not perceiving that happens in the moment. We usually think things through, and then and then the past really gets even stronger. if you start thinking as much or analyzing as much as I mean, I've learned to analyze everything. So we try to analyze everything away. And that's, of course, the mind, and that's not perception. And that's the difficulty when the past comes in, because there seems to be a very strong, when past comes in, there seems a very strong relationship to thinking. And therefore, I think you just mentioned the now. This actual seems to be so important, this immediacy, seeing the things as they are right now. I think that needs to be looked at.
For the first time, like with all the Kiriko, you see that what I liked about that anecdote is that he, for whatever circumstances, stomach flu or whatever else, was able to see things anew. He knew that square inside out because he was a great observer, and he could name everything, and he could even knew the history of every single thing in that every brick, and yet he had never seen it in his life. This is the thing. We've never seen what is. And I don't know, maybe that should ring. Sometimes I say to myself, why doesn't it ring deep, This thing of saying, we've never seen what is. And we'll never see it in terms of, we never can say, I have seen it either. In the sense that time will not enter into the picture. The new, how would you confine it to the known? Or how will you remember it? You can remember certain features. Obviously, he remembered, for example, good old Kiriko, the sensation that he was, and was able to, I don't know, he maybe was quick back into his studio or something, to depict it, to whatever extent. I'm not sure he was able to depict it completely, the intensity of what he experienced in terms of seeing the new, right? Which allowed him a new level of expression. But to see everything anew, say that we analyze even, well, to look at the analysis as though we've never analyzed before. See, that's the thing. The analysis just goes into a rut. So it goes into this whole accustomed mode of thinking. But maybe thinking can be creative too, if it is able to perceive something new in its operation and suspend at least its good old mechanical tracks. Derail this train, the train of thought. The train of thought is tied together by already prescribed links. What if we break that? What if we shift it, change the channel? Even thinking, I think, one time I was very surprised because I also had the notion thought itself is just mechanical. And therefore, see, that was a kind of conclusion that I derived from K. But I had the surprise to sitting one time in my own room and thinking. That was thinking. That was not thought. That was thinking. Thinking can be true, can be creative, can say things that never been said before and that are not coming from anything that anyone has told me. It's whoa. See how do the poets write poetry, the real poet? How would anybody create anything? Because to be able to put words, you need language, not necessarily thought. But they may be thinking. Even Krishnamurti makes a difference between thinking and thought. That sounds a bit, gilding a little the lily or trying to find excuses for continuing to think. But not quite. That everything in life has its own purpose and its own place. And therefore, in my view, probably its own proper function within the creative movement. Right? So thinking, this was one time only, huh? But I swear, to me, it was such a beautiful surprise. Maybe I shouldn't have recognized it. Maybe that's what, put an end to it. I was just so overjoyed by the fact that as far as I was concerned, I was thinking truth. The truth could be thought. Now, wait a minute. I may be contradicting myself even as I speak. I do not know. But that thinking could be true. That you could think truth because where he was coming from, it was just an expression of an intelligence communicating itself, of an authentic perception. That wasn't mine. It wasn't mine. I didn't even know what I was thinking at the time. I didn't write it down or anything, but it was true. The mind, therefore, can be the channel of truth, and it can utter it in thought.
But couldn't,
Whoa.
oh, sorry, couldn't that be the difference between this kind of insight that's coming to us, and then just for us to be able to understand, we have to articulate it through words, through thought. But it's
Yep.
not the same as thinking and figuring something out. It's something that's coming to us creatively, and then we are putting it into words.
Yes. Yes, I think I would agree with that mostly. But look, Krishnamurti appeals to thinking. He says, think. He told us. I mean, I said, the old boy is contradicting himself. Why is he asking us to think? He says, you haven't never thought about these things. Do we think about these things? Because thinking is just the wrong thing to do, right? No, no, no. Question. Questioning. There's an art of thinking. There's an art of questioning. There's an art of investigation. See, he condemns analysis, but he emphasizes the art of questioning. He talks about we must think together because the world needs it. The world is not thinking together. And though in our minds, in my mind, something rings false about his proposal, because he already told us that it's impossible to think together. Because every thought is rooted in his own self-interest, in that bubble of self that we have so well described. And therefore, it's already separateness per se, because it is a self-centered movement and self-interest dominates. So separation is inbuilt in the system. Therefore, the together does not apply. But he said, no. You see, I keep finding Kay very challenging because he keeps undermining his own great absolute statements so that we don't also, rest on any false conclusions for ourselves. That there is thinking together.
But I think he made one pretty radical statement in one of these chapters, and he said there's only seeing and non-seeing, so everything else is just words. So,
right.
I mean, what does he mean exactly by that? I mean, you could also, I could understand it like there's only thinking and not thinking. Everything else is just words. So, which points to really, I mean, if you really want to experience something like love, then there can't be any thinking. There can be only seeing. I mean, if you look at it in that more radical way.
Yes, yes. Yes, but also there can't be true thinking unless there is seeing. And therefore thought can be in the way, the thought that is rooted in the past, as mechanical repetition of pre-established assumptions, conclusions, and beliefs. That will separate. Love cannot be in the past. That's the main thing, isn't it? Somehow, hey, if you love is something very immediate, very present, which bypasses all these conceptual structures and any notions that we may have of it. Love is something extraordinary. I think I only experienced it, if experience is the word, only once in my life. In the sense, I think the closest I got to understanding Krishnamurti's sense of love was this one. And I think I told you, some of you, my friends, of being with my brother there here, talking with him in his carpentry shop. He was a carpenter. One sunny afternoon, and we were just talking like brothers about this and that and the other. And suddenly there was love, a presence in the air, standing there in the carpentry shop. It wasn't love for my brother. It wasn't my love. It wasn't anybody's love. It was love, a presence that meant love. And my brother, he said, what was that? What was that? He noticed it. I couldn't tell him, and put a word to it because he would have misunderstood it. So I didn't give a word, right? And he said, that was love. He said, what love? He would have said, I'm sure of it. See, because we seldom get to the point of sensing a quality of love that is not ours. That has nothing to do with any me or with any other. Look at that. The relationship wasn't even the relationship with my brother, which was good, but it was just itself. Something that is kind of the essence of relationship beyond any objects that are related. That for me was, I mean, these little mysteries have been there, occasionally. And to me, they are hints as to the truth also for myself anyway, that's how I take them, of the truth of what the old boy K was talking about. Oh, my battery is low. So I mentioned them only in that connection. That love exists. It's its own existence in its own domain, timeless domain, separate from any individuals, and yet we, if we are in a sensitive state, can sense it, can partake of those qualities. Just like intelligence can come through when the mind is in a heightened state of sensitivity, of intensity, of questioning, right? That also is there. You need the energy, you need the intensity, you also need the peace, the value of peace, the value of quietness, the value of the perennial self-occupation. That keeps love at bay. That keeps intelligence at bay. This is what we're talking about, no? The bubble of time that is self-referential, the self-occupation movement of self is what keeps these things away, makes for isolation. Look, when he comes to the end of one of these chapters and he says, if the self is not there, then the inner emptiness is gone. The desert has disappeared. See, we want to cover the desert with flowers. And he says, then we go, to relationship, fall in love with beauty, with that beauty, and so on, right? Seek pleasure, seek attachment, the family, the nation, the ideal, the belief. We go all over the world and touch all objects that supposedly will enrich us and take us away from that emptiness and give meaning to our lives. But the desert we're escaping from is created by that very self that is attempting to escape from it. The emptiness, the loneliness, the desert, the sands are created by this self which is escaping from its own nature, from the emptiness. The rain will fall when the self does not escape from its own emptiness. When the self is not, there is no desert. What? Turns the tables on the whole human endeavor. When the self is not, there is no desert to escape from, there's no desert. The emptiness that we escape from is actually a blooming, creative ground that time keeps destroying, that our escapes turns into lifeless, barren land. This is what he's saying. Don't escape. Meet the nothingness. Meet the fear that makes us escape. Go through that fear. See past the imaginary danger that represents to me. See the danger of the me that escapes from his own nothingness. And in that encounter, there will be blooming. See, he talks about the flowering of humanity, inner flowering, talking about this. And then the perfume will be there. Call it what you will. Right? Uroke is the poet. He's the poet of the greatest quality.